Good morning. I've got Tara McDonald with me today, and she is the daughter of a dad who has been diagnosed with dementia and understands the impacts to not only the person diagnosed but the family member. And she's committed to making a change and improving the trajectory and the family environment and understanding around dementia. So, welcome, Tara. Thank you for coming on today.
No, hi Beck. Hi everybody. Thanks for having me. Yeah, look, I'm really thrilled to be able to share story and how my family has been impacted by dementia and how we're committed to trying to improve things for other families and found a future that will have a dementia diagnosis.
Absolutely. And I know that you're kind of wanting to get into that aged care sector so you can really make a change in that space. So do you want to just tell me a little bit about your family's journey?
Yeah, sure. So I was first impacted by dementia when I was about 5 years old. My dad's mum was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease when I was probably about sort of five-ish. And at the time, it was quite a taboo subject and nobody talked about it, including my pa. We were actually told that nobody was allowed to talk about it. And as a result, my nana became really angry. And I don't have a lot of memories of my nana before she had dementia or started to develop dementia. And most of my memories of her are being in a nursing home and visiting her in the nursing home and walking through the doors and being sort of smacked with that smell that was sort of around in the 80s and the 90s. And unfortunately, after about 12 years of living with dementia, she passed away. And just after she passed away, my dad came home from visiting his dad and said that Pa had dementia and that he had to be put into care as well. So my dad not only watched his mum succumb to dementia, but then also watched his dad pass away as a result of dementia. And it was my dad's job to find somewhere for him to live with permanent full-time care. And that was sort of when I was a teenager, and I remember watching my dad go through that, and I remember watching how heartbroken he was. And I remember the relationships that he had with his siblings at that time. And it really squiffed me, and it was a feeling that I had inside of me that was like no one else could understand. And so then in 2005, we had a few whoopsies, if you want to call it that, after my dad died. And it turned out that he had Alzheimer's disease. So we thought, right, here we go again.
Yeah.
So I suppose in a way, as a family, we knew what was coming. And so as a result, we've been able to prepare ourselves and to support my dad the best way that we can so that he can live his life. And one of the things that I've really learned over time is that so many people make decisions, as my dad did for his parents, that is actually based on what suits the children or the family that's actually caring for the person with dementia, rather than what's right for the person with dementia. And so as time went on and dad's dementia progressed, we thought, okay, we're going to have to start looking at care options, because he's 6 foot tall and he's quite strong and he's very, very fit even now. And my mum's only 5'1". And so she's a pretty strong little pocket rocket, but when it got to a point where unfortunately he was unable to control some of his desires or his moods, my mum couldn't defend herself.
Yeah.
And so we started to think about care, and we thought, okay, how are we going to do this? So we did a lot of research, and we found a place around the corner from where mum and dad lived, and we'd heard only good things about it. And we were pretty much set. That was where dad was going to go. And we decided to do respite for 2 weeks there. And dad got there, and it was the most heart-wrenching and sad experience, I think, that I've had through my dad's dementia. And we've had some pretty doozy experiences. And I suppose I want to say to that where we placed dad for respite was not a bad place. It was an amazing place. It just wasn't right for dad. Mm-hmm. And so when I went to visit him when he was in respite, he would be standing at the reception desk with his elbow perched on reception, and he'd be saying to people, have you got any money? And I remember him saying that to me. He didn't know who I was at the time. He said, do you have any money? I said, oh, not really, no. And he said, look, I'll give you $500 if you just take me home. And as a child of a person who has dementia, the moment in your mind where you look at it and think, I really just want to take you home and look after you and care for you. And I don't know who to share this experience with, because I know if I share my mum, it's going to rip her apart, and she's going to feel even more guilty for putting Dad into care and just trying to have a break herself. So I had to walk away, got in my car, sort of dried my eyes, got back to myself and went on with it. So after the 2 weeks, we thought, right, this isn't going to work. And we went back to the drawing board. And so we realised that Dad needed somewhere that was large, as in geographically, had space, and that he needed outside and he needed the opportunity to do his own thing. And because we needed that, and because he needed it, the only place we could find that actually had that care was in Queensland. And we live in Melbourne. So Dad lived in Melbourne his whole life. And we made the decision to move Dad to Queensland because that would provide him with the best that he could live with dementia. We have the cognitive function. We don't need to have, it's hard for us, don't get me wrong. We miss him every day, but we have the cognitive function to understand what's happening and why he lives there now. He doesn't. And I think sometimes family members do things and make decisions in their own interest, and I completely understand why. But it's the person with dementia has to come number one, and that's what we've tried to do.
And I guess in that space, how long was that journey for a family member to make that decision?
So we made the decision to start to think about care probably about, I want to say 18 months to 12 months before Dad went into care. But at the same time, we knew that was coming because we'd experienced it with my dad's parents. So I suppose in a way we were maybe a few steps ahead of other families that haven't dealt with this before. And it helped us to understand what to look for and what was important. And I think sometimes people think that, that the gorgeous crystal glasses and the amazing, painting on the wall and, making things look like a hotel is, what's needed. Yeah. And often it's actually not. And so for example, my dad is, at the moment, he moves everything around. He moves around furniture. He pulls down curtains. He just relocates everything all the time. Mm-hmm. And that's how he fills his day. If you had a place that was beautiful and gorgeous and looked like one of those homes that's like lost my wording, like a display home. Yeah. If you were to look at a display home, and that's what people think that a care place should look like, my dad would have trashed it. Yeah. And he would have ended up being known as a disruptive resident, and then possibly would have been medicated. Where he is in his dementia is, he wants to move stuff around, and if he's not hurting anybody, let him move it around. And I think sometimes, carers and as in an aged care centre or families have this expectation that a person with dementia must act a certain way. And I think sometimes that can create more angst and more heartache for everybody involved, because the person with dementia, their brain is dying. They have brain failure. So you're expecting somebody to act a certain way, but with the brain function that they have, it's like asking a toddler to sit in a 5-star restaurant and not talk or yell. And not that people with dementia go to being childlike, it's just that their brain function might be that of a child. It's very, very different. But you can't expect people with dementia to act or do what you expect them to do, and sometimes families can find that really, really hard, because there's the whole sort of saying of death by 1,000 cuts, and I think sometimes dementia is grief by 1,000 cuts, because you see a moment every now and again where something happens and you realise that you've lost a little bit more of your dad or your mum, and so you grieve that, and then you get over it and you move forward and you think, no, I can do this.
Yeah.
And then something else happens and it goes again. And that can be really, really hard.
So in the support network area, is there anywhere that you have found extremely beneficial for you or your mum or your wider family in seeking that support?
We originally went to Dementia Australia to get some support, and to begin with that was helpful because we were able to come together as a family and work out how to get things happening. And then over time, I learnt that I was only going to cope with this as well if I learnt more about dementia.
Yeah.
And so I suppose I found that support for me and for my family by, I've now started the Bachelor for Dementia Care with the Tasmanian University at the Wicking Institute. I've also become an accredited trainer in the T-Personal Positive Approach Care, and I've also become an advocate within Dementia Australia. So I suppose by immersing myself in the world that is dementia and trying to understand the cognitive decline of a person with dementia, it has helped our family to understand what's happening for my dad. And it also actually helps us check ourselves, because we actually can look at it and go, okay, well, we're reacting like this because we have seen whatever. And that's actually okay, react like that. And if you can actually catch your emotions, you can acknowledge them, but you can also then park them. So the decision you're making is actually based on the best interest for the person with dementia, rather than what you feel you need to do for yourself to feel better.
Absolutely. And in that advocacy space, I've seen that you've recently reached out to daughters and sons of their mum and dad who actually has dementia. So congratulations. I've seen the 25 faces.
Thank you.
It was so heartwarming to see all the beautiful faces and the connection between. I wanted to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So over my time, I've met quite families and children of people with dementia. And as a child, you often not only take on or feel like you need to take on the responsibility of caring for your parent who's had a diagnosis of dementia, but also your parent. And often when the dementia gets to a point, it actually just becomes more about caring for your other parent than the parent with dementia, because the person with dementia is going to do what they do, and you can enable them to do what they can the best way you can. But meanwhile, your parent, your other parent, is watching the love of their life fade away in front of them. And they married that person for better or for worse, but they also married them not thinking that they would disappear from that person's memory. And I remember when we were just before we placed Dad into care, and he walked into the kitchen, and my mum was there making a cup of tea, and he walked into the kitchen and he came up next to her and he said in his he's quite a quiet man, and he said in his quiet voice, he said, "Excuse me, I'm looking for my wife. Have you seen her?" And my mum, who's Jan, had to turn around to him. They've been married for 40 years and said, "Oh, she's just gone to the shops. She'll be back later."
That makes me sad.
And yeah, and as a child of a person with dementia, my heart broke for my dad, but it broke more for my mum.
Yeah.
Because my mum has the cognitive function to understand what's just happened.
Yeah.
And as that went on, I looked at that and went, I can't be the only kid that's going through this. And as a kid of a person with dementia, you're not only caring for your loved one with dementia and possibly the other parent, but you may have your own family.
Yeah.
So you've then actually got that whole world to worry about as well. And what I've found happening is that a lot of my friends who are in their late 30s and 40s are having babies or just starting their families. And my dad was 66 when he was diagnosed. And if he'd been 40 when I was born, I would have been 26 when he was diagnosed. My brother would have been 24 and my sister would have been 22. So if you think back to what you were doing at that time in your life, where you're at, trying to find out who you are, building your career, trying to find, a partner, pay for a house, all those types of things, travel, see the world. How can you do that when you've got a loved one at home with dementia and you feel responsible for supporting them? And so the collage is about acknowledging those people. And it's about saying, you know what, there's people all over the world, because those photos are from all over the world. There are people all over the world that feeling or are feeling just what you're feeling. And the moments where your heart breaks for your parent or parents, you're not alone. And I think one of my biggest drivers is to provide a support network for children. And it's important to remember also that children don't always have to be young.
Yeah.
So I'm 39, but my sister is 35. But there's also people in that collage, and they're in their 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
A child can be any age.
Yeah.
And that's why I've sort of written in there that, I was still someone's child. And, I remember hearing a story once of a lady who was looking after her mum, and her mum was still living at home, and this lady was at work at the time, and she got a phone call from her mum, so she took it, as she usually does. And her mum turned around to her and said, "Oh, I'm looking for," I can't remember his name, but was her husband. "So I'm looking for so-and-so, have you seen him?" And in the middle of an open office, this woman had to turn around to her mum and say, "Mum," so I can't remember his name, let's call him Bob. "Bob passed away 5 years ago. He's not coming home." And all the people in the office kind of went. So that woman not only felt like she had this heartbreaking moment of having to explain to her mother that her, the love of her life had died, but she had to do it in an environment where everyone could see her and hear her. Because as a child of a person with dementia, she has this life that's still going on the side that she has to run, because she has money and she has to pay bills and she has to continue with her life. And so I really hope that this collage, I suppose, highlights some of those trials and tribulations and brings everybody together to sort of, do a virtual hug.
Yeah.
And say, I see you and I hear you and I know what you're going through because I'm going through it too.
Absolutely. And if you think about, there's more than 50 million people globally who are diagnosed with dementia. If they've got 2 or 3 kids, like that's 150 million kids around the world that are struggling with what your whole family has gone through. And it's just heartbreaking that some of them may or may not have access or the emotional support, and they're the ones that are enduring this every single day, watching their mum or dad fade away in front of them, and they've been their rock their whole life.
Yeah. And look, keep in mind also that I know my family have been told a number of times that we're quite unique because we all get along.
Yeah.
So, you've got families also that don't get along. And trying to make decisions is really, really hard when you don't get along. Or if one child decides that we must take care of their parent and the other siblings go, "Well, I don't really care."
Yeah.
So, the other children don't see them very often and they go over and visit and they do that sort of high level chit chat, which people with dementia can do quite well because it's, it's on the right side of the brain, so it's part of the rhythm. They don't lose it. And they'll ring the sibling and go, "I don't know what you're talking about. Mum's fine."
Yeah.
And meanwhile, the person that's doing all the care is just like, "Oh my God, you have no idea what's going on." and that can cause so much trouble. And then on top of that, also moving forward, more and more people are coming from single parent families. So sometimes people may feel like they have to care for their parent on their own because their other biological parent isn't on the scene to care for that person.
Yeah.
So the evolution of care or the way in which we will want to care for our loved ones in the future is going to change. And, you know, if you put on top of that also economy, you put on top of that housing prices, you put on top of that the contemplation or the opinions that people have on aged care at the moment due to COVID, whether they be right or wrong, it's obviously a very different discussion. There are a lot of people out there that are doing amazing work. And I think there's going to be a real change in the world. And I really hope to be able to educate people, especially kids, about dementia before they have to deal with it, because it helps you park that emotion to the side so that you can actually make decisions based on information and the best interest for your loved one rather than what you're in.
Absolutely. So what is your vision for the next 6 months? I know I would like to share with the wider audience what your strategy is and what your vision is, because I know I 100% back what you're doing, and I want others to be able to hear what you want.
So I want lots of things. And I want lots of things because I think we deserve lots of things. I think often that dementia gets pushed to the side because it's sort of seen as what cancer maybe used to be seen as, where people would get a diagnosis of cancer and it was like, oh my gosh, you know, put everything in order, it's over, it's done.
Like
dementia still has that.
You don't have a life.
Yeah, dementia still has that feeling. So a lot of people look at it and go, you know, oh well. And I don't think they do it. They don't say, oh well, in a malicious way. It's just more of a, so I really want to change that. But I also want to provide families with the opportunity to have spite and to put, you know, like if I had little kids and I was looking after my dad, I'd love it if I could put my kids and my dad in the same place and work, and they can hang out together for the day and be cared for, and then I can come back at the end of the day and I can take them home again.
Yeah.
But my real sort of, I suppose, focus is really improving the support and care for kids or, you know, adults that are the children of people with dementia. And often people, when I sort of say kids impacted by dementia, they think, oh yeah, you know, 10 years old, 5 years old, you know, they don't really understand what's going on. And I'm like, no. Everybody is somebody's child.
Yeah.
We're not here without a parent.
Yeah.
So we're all kids. And so, you know, we need to sort of play with the idea of what the word is to be a child. And I just think the word offspring sounds a bit weird. So if anyone can think of a better word than child, let me know, because I can't think of one at the minute.
So if people were wanting to get into contact with you and find out a little bit more about what you're trying to achieve, or whether you're going to work with aged care organisations to support those families in that space, how can they get into contact with you?
So the way to get in contact with me is probably via social media. So you can look me up on Post for Alzheimer's. So it's post_for_Alzheimer's. And I can get in contact with you. That's otherwise also through LinkedIn on Tara McDonald. So I suppose just to sort of pick up also on the information around providing support for kids. It's not only kids, it's obviously also, you know, the spouse of someone with dementia. And at the moment, there seems to be limited information around the positive approach to care model, which has been developed heap of snow in America. And one of my other big drivers is to bring that to Australia and to really, I suppose, celebrate positive approach to care, which focuses on the cognitive function of somebody and the science of dementia rather than the memory loss, because dementia is so much more than memory loss. Dementia is brain death, and it's almost like their brain is, every time their brain fades a little bit more, your heart fades a little bit more for everybody else, because you're losing them. But if you can understand where they're coming from and you can understand why they're behaving the way they are from a cognitive way, it helps you to actually cherish the moments that you have with that person and to really celebrate what they have left, because they are still the same person, they're just a little bit different. And that needs to be remembered, because you know, the memories that you have with that person will never fade. And you can either choose to have the memories moving forward be negative or positive. And the understanding, you know, as I said, the science behind dementia, I think personally has helped me to celebrate those memories as happy ones rather than perhaps ones that I would see as my dad fading away to what this terrible disease is, which is dementia.
And I think for me personally, that's what we're missing in aged care, is understanding the science behind the brain and why that person is acting that way, and they're not just acting it. We're not meeting something, and we need to better understand what they're going through. That's where the segregation, that compassionate care actually happens. We need to find a consistent approach to educating our care workers and even nurses, where the dementia module, it's still an elective. Like, how is that okay in today's society that the education we're receiving isn't specialised in something that is impacting us so significantly?
Yeah, I hear you. And I suppose going on to care as well, it's also about the expectations of the family. And sometimes, like for example, my dad went through a stage recently where he didn't want to wear a shirt. Don't know why, he just didn't want to wear a shirt. And so I would do a FaceTime observation with, if I can't get there, because obviously I'm in Melbourne and he's in Queensland. And, you know, he kept taking his shirt off. And the person who was doing the FaceTime with me said, "Oh, look, sorry, he keeps taking his shirt off. We don't know why, you know, he just keeps taking it off." And it was like, Jim, put it back on, put it back on. And I just turned around to them and I said, "Is he hurting anybody?" They're like, "Oh, no." I said, "Well, you know, if he doesn't want to wear a shirt, don't wear a shirt. You know, it's, who are you putting the shirt on for?" And, you know, or like, you know, Dad will stand there and hold a wall for hours at a time because he thinks the house is going to fall down. And he'll just stand there and you'll hold it. And, you know, we've sort of just said, well, you know what? If he's not hurting anyone, if he's not a trip hazard, if he's hydrated, if he's eating, if he's doing everything else, let him stand there. It's not, you know, you can't expect him to behave in a way that we would expect him to behave because he doesn't have the cognitive function. If you pull him away, he's just going to go back there because that's where his brain is, right there. So, but you know, there was one point where they had to go off and it was time for him to have lunch. So one of his carers actually stood next to him and held the wall and said, "It's okay, Jim, I'll hold the wall up for you. You can go inside." And so Dad put his hands down and he walked inside.
I love that.
So, you know, dementia's here to stay. And, you know, we can either stick our heads in the sand or we can get educated and we can understand it so that we can also have a conversation with carers, as in PCAs and nurses, on a clinical level. So when, you know, you say to them, "Mum's stopped walking, what's going on?" and they say, "We're not sure," and that, you know, she could have a UTI, she could have anything, and they're like, "We don't know what's going on." Don't get angry because that nurse doesn't know what's going on. your mum's brain may have actually gone to the point where they can't create a fever anymore.
Yeah.
So they stop walking because that's the way the brain can cope with the fact that there's an infection.
Yeah.
So the nurse can't know that. Mm-hmm. So don't get angry with them for not knowing that. Work with them and say, okay, they're not walking. What can we try? And go through the process of trying to work out what's happening together. Don't fight.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make anything. And Teepa Snow has an amazing saying where she says that, you know, caring for a person with dementia, there's two people. There's the person with dementia and the carer, and they have to work like this. Mm-hmm. Because if they don't, you get this.
Yeah. And
that's true.
Yeah, it is true.
And if I offended anybody with that, I'm really sorry, but it's just, you know, what happens.
No, I'm to Teepa Snow on Wednesday, so I'm really looking.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to anyone who hasn't heard of her, which I hope they'd be living under a rock if they haven't heard of her. But it's really bringing to light and bringing people's understanding around Teepa's model of care that is so adaptable, not just in a care facility, but in life. Like, it's such an adaptable approach to supporting your loved one or the person you're supporting in care. And yeah, I'm thrilled to be speaking to her on Wednesday.
If you haven't heard about her, get onto the YouTube, type in Teepa Snow and watch some of it. But a disclaimer is that she is amazing at interpreting or acting like she has dementia, and some of her videos can feel a little bit full on. Yeah. And it's okay to step away from them and to have her take a breath. Try and bring yourself back to it, because the knowledge that you can learn or the information that you can gain from her videos is unbelievable, and you won't find it anywhere else delivered in the way she delivers it. And I can only dream to become as good as she is, but I'm certainly working towards it.
Well, I'm really happy. I'm really happy for you and the work in this advocacy space, and I know how determined you are to really make that change. So I want to thank you for talking to me today.
Thank you for all your work.
And for sharing your story. I know it's hard, but I know that you're that driven, that you need to make people understand and empathise with your story so you can then connect on that level. So thank you. Thank you for everything.
No, my absolute pleasure. And as I said, if anyone wants to reach out to me, post for Alzheimer's on Instagram, Twitter or Facebook, or you can hit me up on LinkedIn where this will be seen. So thank you, Beck. Thank you for everything you're doing, and this initiative is awesome. And I've loved videos so far, and hopefully mine can add to that. And I won't be anywhere as good as like Kate Floss's or anybody or Teepa's or anything like that, but I just really appreciate the opportunity to chat to you. So thank you.
Everyone's different and everyone's going to touch someone in some way. Thanks, Taz. Yeah.